The Selkies are the seal people, those who can take off their seal skins and become human and walk upon the land. And on certain beaches, if you know where to look, you will find them dancing all night long beneath the full moon. Oh, moon and tide, the water is deep, the water is wide. And the moon and the tide have brought us here to dance all night with the sky so near. And when the moon goes down and the sun appears, why, it's home to the waves and the water so dear. Now, on this particular night, near this particular beach, an old fisherman was rowing home late one night after casting his nets off the outer banks. And he heard the sound of singing across the water, and he looked, and he saw the Selkies dancing under the full moon. And one particular Selkie there caught his eye and made his heart race, because like him, her face was a net of wrinkles, and her great mane of hair was the color of driftwood long, long on the beach. But she was as merry and jumped as high as any in that company, and he watched for a long time before setting his oars in and rowing away home. And when next the moon was full, the old fisherman filled a basket full of fish from the day's catch, and he went down from his house by the sea to the beach where he knew the Selkies would be dancing. And when they saw him, they were afraid, and they ran to the far end of the beach, and they huddled about their sealskins, because in all the stories, a man who is in love with a Selkie will steal her skin and take away her power so that she cannot go back into the water and she has to stay with him. But the old fisherman held out his hands to show that he meant no harm, and he showed them the basket of fish he had brought as a gift. And he walked up to the old Selkie he had seen the month before, and he said, "I'm old, and the few years that remain to me would be but the blink of an eye to one such as you who lives so long. And I am afraid of the dying and the darkness, and I would like to invite you to come and stay with me at my house as my guest and tell me all of the things that you must have seen. It's not just fish and seaweed down there, is it? There are other things. And then maybe when the day comes, it'll be naught but a change of wind." And the old Selkie glared at him, and she thrust her sealskin behind her, and he said, No, I would never try to take your sealskin from you. That would be a terrible thing. I know that's what all the stories say, but that's not love. And anyway, I'm too old for that jumping up and down. I was just hoping that you would be my friend in these last years. And the old Selkie's eyes grew wide and almost perfectly round till for a minute she really did kind of look like a seal. And then she stretched out one hand and touched him gently on the side of the cheek, and she spoke but a single word. She said, "Wait." And then, giggling like a schoolgirl, she threw on her sealskin and dove home beneath the waves. Well, the old fisherman went home, and he went to sea, and he cast his nets, mended his sails, and he sold his fish at market. And that night with the Selkies faded like a dream that comes just before the sunrise. But when next the moon was full, the old fisherman filled his basket full of fish, and he went down to the beach where the Selkies were dancing, and the old Selkie saw him. And she came up to him and held out her hand and spoke but a single word. She said, "Dance." Oh, moon and tide, the water is deep, the water is wide. And the moon and the tide brought us here to dance all night with the sky so near. And when the moon goes down and the sun appears, why, it's home to the waves and the water so dear. And the old fisherman danced all night with the Selkies, and in the morning the old Selkie reached out and touched him gently on the side of the cheek before disappearing into the sea. And when next the moon was full, the old fisherman filled his basket full of fish, went down to the beach, danced all night with the Selkies, and in the morning the old Selkie came up to him, and she held out her hand and spoke but a single word. She said, "Beard." The old fisherman thought for a moment, and then he pulled out his knife that had cut rope and nets and fish, and he cut off his beard below the chin, and he gave it to her, and she took it with her into the sea. And when next the moon was full, the old fisherman filled his basket full of fish, went down to the beach, danced all night with the Selkies, and in the morning the old Selkie came up to him, and she held out her hand and spoke but a single word. She said, "Hair." Out came the knife again, and he cut off his great mane of hair, and he had little bits sticking out, and he looked kind of silly. And all the Selkies laughed, and they ran their hands over his head, and he laughed with them. But he gave the hair to the old Selkie, and into the dark waters it went. And when next the moon was full, the old fisherman filled his basket full of fish, went down to the beach, danced all night with the Selkies, and in the morning the old Selkie came up to him, and she had a tiny seashell of a creature that he didn't know. And she held it out to him and spoke but a single word. She said, "Blood." Out came the knife again, and a moment later the tiny shell was full of blood, and she cradled it like a newborn as she went into the sea. And after that, every month that the old fisherman would go and dance with the Selkies, at the end of the night the old Selkie would ask him for a gift. And one night it was one of his boots, and he went home in one boot and one sock. And one time she asked him for his greatcoat that he wore to sea when the weather grew foul. And each time, whatever she asked, he gave it to her freely, without question or condition. And then there came the night when the moon rose full over fields ripe for harvest, and the salmon were swimming upstream in every river. And the old fisherman filled his basket full of fish, and he went down to the beach, and he gave the fish to his friends, but he was very tired that night, and he couldn't dance. And so he sat on the keel of a long-ago shipwreck, and his friend sat with him and held his hand, and they watched the Selkies dance and listened to them sing. And when the sunrise was turning the eastern sky to pale wheat, one by one the Selkies came up, and they said good night, and into the sea they went. And the old Selkie helped the old fisherman up, and she helped him walk down to the very edge of the waves. And this time, she had a gift for him. For she reached into the sand and she pulled out his very own sealskin that she had made for him out of her magic and the gifts that he had freely given without question or condition. And she showed him how to wriggle into it. She wriggled into hers, and they both stood there at the edge of the sea with just their faces showing like children playing in the blankets just before bedtime. And he laughed with the silly joy of it, and she laughed too, and then she spoke but a single word. She said, "Love." Then quick as a salmon flashing bright, both of them pulled their seal cowls over their faces, and together they dove home beneath the waves. And when the moon goes down and the sun appears, why, it's home to the waves and the water so dear. Thank you so much.